Hey there, gals and guys, Vetemor here, and today I'm really pleased to be bringing you a awesome AMA with the co-founder of Illuvium, Aaron Warwick. In this video, Aaron answers all of the questions that you guys have put forward to him. We mostly go into the information surrounding gameplay, but we also delve into compromised wallets, as well as the current timelines for staking version 2, the land sale, and the game launch. But that's enough introduction, so let's just get straight into it. Well, hello, Aaron. How's it going?
Hey, it's going well. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. It's good to get out there and speak to some of the people in the community that get our message out to everyone. So hopefully I can give you a little bit of insight and give the people watching a bit of insight as well.
I appreciate that. Well, to kick things off, before we jump into all the questions I've got taken from the community, is there anything that's on your mind particularly that you've been recently thinking on that you'd like to share with everyone?
Well, today I've been working on two things specifically. One of them is reviewing an Illuvial, which is our last one, and it's going to be a little bit divisive in the community. It's definitely the most degenerate thing that we've done. We've done a few that are a little bit memey. This one is bordering on into people will walk out and never play the game territory. I think it's quite funny and clever, but that could be part of the thing that they use to lock me up. The other thing I've been doing today is working on the script for something that'll eventually become an Illuvium movie. And I've been trying really hard to make it so that people cry harder than what they currently will. So I guess what I would like to say is accept my sincerest apologies. I'm not really doing much for the community at the moment besides bringing them pain.
So what is this divisive character? Could it be like a Pikachu level, or are we talking something different?
No, this is like really degenerate. I won't go into it yet.
Okay.
We'll reveal that. We'll reveal that when the time comes. But let's just say that there's Illuvials that you could do that people would say, "Wow, that's scary," or "funny," or "That's a bit of a meme." This one's a little bit like, why would you do it? It's going too far. And the way that I look at it is we didn't actually plan on having this many Illuvials, and we've had to do this extra one because of a mistake that I made with our counts. So we had to add in one extra, and you'll see it eventually. We call it the Shia LaBeouf Illuvial, and it'll make sense once you guys actually see it. But it's horrendous, and if there's a hell, I'll be going there specifically for coming up with this one.
I'm looking forward to it. Well, not you going to hell. So let's get into the questions. The first one is from Hero, who asks if we will have like a detailed combat log after each fight with like damage dealt and taken, the healing done by each Illuvial, and just other types of information for players who enjoy theory crafting.
Yeah, there's a panel that you have inside of the combat engine that tells you those details as the fight goes on. Things like healing, damage blocked, we call it damage mitigated, and also things like damage dealt, etc., etc. Takedowns are another thing that is included in that. This is actually, when I say we've got that, we've designed the UI around that, and we've designed the back-end systems that will allow us to do this. It's not finished yet. But it will be there, and it will be something. I'm a theory crafting type of a person myself, so it's definitely something that I want to have in there. We actually want to extend it past that. We have a thing that we call the echoes of each Illuvial, and these are effectively like the high scores. So when you look into the Illuviary, you'll be able to look at a particular character. You'll be able to see what are its mannerisms and stuff like that. But then there'll also be a tab that says This is how many takedowns it has. This is the record for the most damage dealt by it, et cetera, et cetera. So there'll be a little bit of a logging because we think that that's important for the game going forward to be able to have that sort of extra functionality in there. When it gets implemented is another question. It's not technically part of what we need to get to the public beta because we feel that there's more pressing matters. But if we can get it done before the start of the public beta, then we certainly will. And it'll certainly be one of the priorities once the public beta starts to get that in there.
Awesome. The next one has been a very popular question. What are the minimum spec requirements to play the game? And is there work that's being put in to make it accessible on cheaper PCs, at least like down the line?
So at the moment, we don't have an official answer. So what I've said to people previously who have asked this question in our Discord or on Telegram is don't buy a PC just because of something that we say, right? We're always trying to get the specs of the PC down. At the moment, we're thinking something along the lines of a 1050 Ti should be able to run it on the minimum settings with a decent frame rate. We've got that currently working in most of the cases that we've got. There's a few situations where we probably need to do a little bit more optimization to get it exactly to that level. So that's why we're not committing to saying we can definitely do this. But also, we're probably going to be doing quite a bit of optimization after that to lower it so that it works on even lower spec PCs. The other thing that people need to remember is that we're quite keen on building out the mobile game, and the mobile game will require having far smaller file sizes for the assets. The texture sizing and stuff like that will be significantly reduced to get it to fit onto a mobile game. And because we're doing all of that, the minimum spec for the PC game should drop over time as well. So hopefully it's something that we're not really cutting any people out of the game for, but at the same time, that will mainly come with the mobile version of the game. So if you don't have a strong PC, or if you don't have medium level PC, if it's just very basic, you might find that your settings have to be quite low and maybe not the highest frame rate, or at least swap over to the mobile game when that comes out as well.
So potentially, like by the end of the year, even on like a cheap laptop, you might be able to run it at lowest specs.
Yeah. The lowest specs will just keep on getting lower and lower and lower as we optimize all the various things. There is a lot of work that we need to do to get the mobile version working because there's a lot of technologies that we use that aren't available on mobile platforms. So there's a little bit of work to be done there, but the general rule of thumb is that as time goes on, more and more people will be able to play the game. One, by the settings dropping, and two, by people gradually upgrading their PCs.
Awesome. So J28 says that he's a huge fan of the bonding curve when it comes to catching Illuvials, but how do we plan to match that to player demand? I.e., like if the game became hugely successful and more people than expected started playing the game, would it not like get too hard to catch Illuvials and then make the game kind of unplayable?
So I don't think that anyone has to worry about the game becoming unplayable because of things like this. We use a bonding curve that is, it's like a logistic curve, effectively it sort of goes up and then sort of tapers off. So the general idea is at the start, as a particular Illuvial might become popular and a lot of people are capturing it, it will go up in terms of the difficulty and the sort of expected cost to capture it. Expected cost is just like a mathematical way of saying, like, if you look at it on average across all the different shards, how much money do you need to spend usually to capture it? If you had a 1% chance and it cost $1 million, then you'd have to spend a lot of money to capture that thing. We never get to the point where it becomes ridiculously expensive to capture it because it sort of tapers off and it only goes up by tiny incremental amounts. But even with that being the case, there's a whole bunch of other Illuvials that may be less popular, which are at a lower place on that curve, which means that people can capture them for a lower expected cost, which means that there's going to be a natural equilibrium that comes about from all of these different characters, because the ones that are less popular will end up being cheaper. And because we're trying to make them all be very balanced, the only thing that can really affect that is sort of like the cost versus the popularity of just whether or not people think it's a cool looking character, I guess. So you're never going to have to worry about if 1 million people come in and play the game, like how can it work? We effectively allow an infinite number of them to be minted, but only during the period for which you can capture these ones. At the end of that period, it's done, cut off. There's no way to get them anymore. And because of that, there's definitely going to be a finite number. It's just we don't know what that finite number of them is going to be. If we have millions of players, that finite number will be much larger. If the game ends up launching and it's just you and I playing against each other, we're the only 2 people in the world, then it's probably going to be a little bit of a smaller number that we have in there. But effectively, it'll be finite, and then that will determine the rarity of those particular characters and whether or not people see them as having any value. So we've thought about these things, and we think that this is the best way to go forward. On top of that, once they're all minted, there's a few different options that we can do to sort of narrow that down. Fusion is one of them. There's a few other systems that we have in the game that would make you want to effectively destroy one of your characters for some extra bonus. And because of that, even if we did get super popular and there was 1 million, maybe eventually that drops down to 500,000 of those characters, which might be considered fairly rare. And if you're talking about like the best stats Holo version of something that is tier 5, then maybe there's a very, very small number of them in the world and they become quite expensive and sought after. So I think that we've got this covered. We've got a good team behind us that are helping to try and work these things out. I'm fairly confident that we'll have a good system.
I've heard it likened to sort of Magic the Gathering, that with each series, like they technically can print as many as there is demand for, with just the fact that you've got added, like there is like an increase in difficulty. I didn't know that about the fact that it then curves off. I think that is genius. I think you guys have put in a lot of thought into getting the economy right so that it is long-term sustainable.
Yeah. We've definitely tried to get the economy to as good a point as we can. We've actually just hired another economist to work on the project just a couple of weeks ago, and I've gone through with him all of the details that we thought of as we were trying to make the game. It could be that there's something that we don't see that makes the game, not as perfect as what it could be, but we're pretty relentless when it comes to making things better and improving it. So if we find out that there's some issue with it, then we will fix it and get it right. But in this particular case, I don't see it as being a particular problem, mainly because we do liken it to those physical systems where cards are printed and they are sold, and then at some point the factory stops printing them. The difference with us is that when our factory stops printing them, we can be 100% certain that there's never going to be a forgery goes into the system because of the way that the blockchain allows that to happen. And in addition to that, we know exactly how many there are in the world. So there's never going to be a situation where some grandma has a whole bunch of packs in her attic with 52 Charizards, and then they get put onto the market, and now all of a sudden, instead of there being 10 in the world, there's now 62 in the world, and it just tanks the price of it. You can always know what there will be in our system, so you'll have perfect information with which that you can work out whether or not you want to speculate on the price of something. So the system of cards, I think, is brilliant. It's existed for a very long time now. It works. It does what it's supposed to do. We want to do something exactly like that. The difference is they have to, just through the necessity of packaging it and selling it, give you just a pack. Whereas we can do things like saying, hey, when you get this pack, the fact that you previously got these other 2 cards means that it's more rare for you to get them again, right? Or it's actually harder for you to do it. Or even better, instead of just opening the pack, you dive into a world and you get to see all these cool plants and things that are around and actually have an experience. But at its core, when we get down to the finances and the mechanics of it, the overworld is essentially just a giant pack of cards that you're purchasing, but just with a lot of gamification around it to make it more fun.
Are you enjoying this video so far? In that case, you need to be smashing that like button in the face, just like that. Awesome, awesome. Now, on a slightly more somber note almost, what if somebody has like a compromised account, like somebody's hacked them, let's say they're staked in the protocol, with staking version 2 coming out, what would you say to someone in such a position, as this is obviously becoming somewhat of a common question? Is there any way that we can create resources for people in this unfortunate position?
So in terms of the actual thing that we can do for someone that has a compromised account, because of the nature of crypto, it is very difficult. If someone's got your keys, if they've scammed you or something, then it's pretty tough after the fact to go back and give you any sort of safety or solace. The only thing that sort of gives me a little bit of comfort is that most of the people that get scammed are only just dipping their toes in the water and they're fairly new to it. And once they get bitten, they're obviously twice shy and they don't get scammed again because they start to be a little bit more scared of links and stuff like that. In terms of the practical applications, the V2 staking allows you to change your wallet address. However, any tokens locked into a particular contract are effectively stuck there until they become unlocked. And so they can't be moved until they're unlocked, but you can change where the yield rewards get minted to. So you could change your wallet, you could get all your yield rewards, you could claim them and get them claimed into a wallet. If the scammer was claiming them as well, then they would, because they have access to your keys, they could effectively pick a new wallet address and claim them into that new one, and you get into like a bit of a weird fight with it. But so I mean, it's not quite as bad as if someone just has a wallet with a whole bunch of tokens in it and they lose it because of the fact that they're all locked. But once they become unlocked, it becomes a bit of a race between the two people to try and get it out. I'm not sure if there's anything else we can do besides that. We could, like you say, we could put out a video showing what to do. My only concern with that is that maybe that teaches the scammers a little bit more. They can start to look in there. It could be that they were trying to steal your wallet on some other website that has nothing to do with Illuvium, and you've just got ETH in there and they took it all out of there and they're like, yes, I scammed that guy and that's it. And it could be that you've got a whole bunch of Illuvium or yield that's still in there that maybe they don't even think to claim. But it's a difficult situation to be in, and I don't think that I've got any way of being able to say, oh, we just snap our fingers and it's all fixed for you. If we did, all of the compelling things that make crypto so great would sort of melt away, and you've got to weigh up the benefits versus the risks.
The thing that has recently given me some hope is that a lot of these people that have contacted me that are in that situation have said like that they have actually tried to claim some rewards, like they've put some ETH on there and it hasn't been immediately removed. So not everyone has like a bot that's been put in there. And also not like many of the hackers probably don't even know that there is staked Illuvium in there. So, and even if you did put out educational info on how to recover an account, obviously scammers can use that information, but someone that's been hacked and that's got money that's seriously meaningful to their life in there, they'll be a lot more motivated than a hacker that has like 20 accounts hacked to be able to get in there first thing and really retrieve their money. So I am very excited to be able to assist these people in some way to just get the best chance to Obviously, it's hit and miss.
I try to help out as many people as I can. Yeah, when people have come to me and said that they were hacked, and some of the people who say that they've been hacked are actually scammers themselves, and they're like, "Well, I've been hacked, and here's my wallet address, and here's where it was moved to. So you have to give me tokens to match it." And then if we just did that, there'd be a certain percentage of them who they're just a scammer themselves, and they're just like, "Yes, I got more tokens," right? So. But part of the cool thing about them being staked is that they're not still in that person's wallet. They're in this other contract. And so unless they go to all of these individual like landing pages that show what things that they have staked, they might not be able to check all of them. And so I don't want to draw too much attention to ourselves as like, oh, this is what you do when you've got Illuvium, because it might mean that it starts to get the scammers to say, well, whenever we scam someone, we check for Illuvium in there as well. There's no perfect solution in the end, but everybody should try to be as safe and secure as they possibly can, and understand that if anyone messages you on any sort of a social media, it's a scam. Unless they come up to you on the street and they give you their birth certificate and their passport and their wallet, and they lock themselves up to the railing, don't trust anything that they say. That's the only time it becomes safe.
And the thing you were saying earlier with being able to claim the rewards elsewhere into another wallet, is that like when we can upgrade, or is that after rewards unlock and migration? So
after you upgrade, you are now in the V2 protocol. Part of V2 is that you can change your wallet address. So it'll change where you're linked with the system, but it will still have access to the existing stake tokens and stuff like that. So there's certain things where there's nothing that you can do, and it will become a race against time to get those tokens out and migrate them across. But one area that you might be able to sort of avoid that is with the yield. So when you claim those tokens, they have to go to a particular account, and if you change that to something that isn't compromised, then you should be fine to claim those tokens. And there's a lot of cases based on the APY where that amount of tokens actually ends up being the lion's share over the course of the 2 years. So, and you can still get the other ones back if it happens to be that the person doesn't have some sort of a sophisticated bot on there. And again, most scammers are not sophisticated. They're just putting their name out there and just trying to go to as many people as possible. So it's not the end of the world, but the thing that we're trying to do is get our systems secure enough that we're getting through a lot of the scammers and making it so that we have a much safer environment for people. But in the end, there's always ways for someone to send a message to you. And if there's a way for someone to send a message to you, and that message says, hey, you're going to, turn back the clock 20 years, or you're going to be 50 times more handsome, or I've got all this crypto for you, there's going to be a small subset of people who are like, I want to take that pill, or I want to click this link. And all I can say is just don't. There's just no free lunches out there. Whatever you get is going to come from what you've earned.
Totally. And to move back into a bit more into the game, Mabsy asks, will Illuvials be monitored and either like nerfed or buffed depending on the meta? And how would it work with the NFTs being minted if that is the case? And would this change the value of NFTs depending on what the current meta is within the game?
Yeah, so it's actually an interesting question. There's a lot of ways that we've looked at to set up these systems, but effectively what it comes down to is there's a key range of criteria that we or information that we put onto the NFT that says that this is what it is, and it's immutable, and it'll always be that. It includes things like the Illuvial that it is, the type of NFT as well. There's also a random hash value that we put on there, which is used for bonuses across all of our games. And these things are static, right? They're things that will never change. And then there's other things which relate to our combat engine or could relate to another game, et cetera, et cetera. They are set inside of the individual games, and that's where they can change. So the answer is yes, they can be nerfed and buffed. Yes, they will. Those particular stats and things like that are not on the NFT, because if they were, it would become very difficult. You'd have to use some sort of a delta system where it's like the stat is this, but at the moment it's like +5. But in the end, it's still got that +5, so you might as well just do it on the server to begin with. There's other weird ways that we looked at, like creating ERC tokens associated with them, but it ends up being too convoluted. So there will be certain data that is not on the cards, but that's only because it exists inside of our game, and in other games it could be totally different anyway. So there will be these sort of changes. As far as will they change the value? They might a little bit, but I think that it's more likely that the value will be tied to the type, the line, the immutable characteristics of it, the things that aren't related to individual fluctuations up and down in time. Things like how many exist, right? Is it a holo? These are all immutable characteristics of it. That will be something that I think is where the lion's share of the value of that particular NFT comes from. So it may change it a bit, but it wouldn't be something massive. I mean, the other thing to keep in mind is that our nerfing and buffing, or our balance, we're trying to make it as light touch as possible, right? On one end of the spectrum, you've got games like Teamfight Tactics from Riot, where they purposely make the changes huge and totally disrupt the meta all the time. And one character can go from being you have to go for it every time, to all of a sudden it's completely useless in the course of one patch. Then you've got games on the other side, like chess, where patches come out around about once every 200 years. You know, like you have the en passant patch, and you have castling patches and stuff like that. These are things that just basically don't exist. We're trying to be closer to the chess side of things, where we don't change a lot. The start of the game there will be some fluctuations that are a bit bigger. And then as time goes on, we want those fluctuations to just be like really small, because we've designed the game from the ground up to be more about your ability to counter your opponent, rather than about having, you know, the best meta at the moment. So there's no best deck. There's no reason why you can't win with, for example, fire characters. There's always going to be ways to win with fire. It doesn't matter whether it's slightly better than water or whatever. What we do have is, on an individual basis, there will be things that your opponent plays that you can counter, no matter what the balance currently says, that will allow you to win that match. So overall, we do it, but it's not going to be a big deal, I don't think.
Because the edges are a lot more slim than like...
Yeah. It's something where, like, in some games, I remember there was a patch for Teamfight Tactics back, I think it was set 3, where J4, one of the characters, was effectively everyone in the lobby would go for it every time. Not 2 people, not 4 people. It was 8 people, or if it wasn't 8, it was 7. And then one guy who's like, I refuse to play it. I hate this. It sucks that this is so overpowered. It's ridiculous. But it was a lot of people going for it. And the winner of the game will be the person who just rolled it the most. And that was like one of the worst patches. I remember thinking, this just effectively ruins the game. And we don't want to be in that situation. So we want it to be, well, okay, maybe this particular character is a bit stronger, but it's still definitely weaker than the things that counter it. If it happens to be a Maelstrom character, which is 2 waters, then when you play nature or when you play air, or Tempest or Bloom or something like this, then if you outdraft the opponent, you'll win. It doesn't matter that water is the current best, but the other thing is it might be best by just a tiny amount, because we'll start with changes that might be like 10% changes to characters, and then it'll be like 9 and 8, and eventually we'll get to the point where we'll be like adding 1 damage to the basic attack of a character and saying, okay, now it's balanced. It's never going to be this crazy wild thing going back and forth. We don't want there to be a constantly changing meta. We just want a game that has a set of characters and all of them are viable.
Awesome. That is brilliant. That is brilliant. Are you still here and still enjoying this video? Well, then you better be tapping that ass. I mean, that subscribe button. Yeah. Subscribe button. A quick question just actually came to my mind. I saw actually Rawlord theorizing about holos, and like I was under the impression that to find like a dark holo, it's just a rarer thing to find than a normal holo. But he was theorizing that maybe if you get 3 holos, fuse them, you get a dark holo like level 2, and if you fuse those, you get like a cosmic holo or whatever. Like, could something like that be in place, or are they completely separate?
Well, that is the no. That's literally the current plan. Is that dark holo is not something that you can get through finding. So we do need to do a little bit more work. We're probably a bit behind on the finishes. We call holo and shiny and all these things the finish of the character. We have a very similar system for Illuvitas, and we need to get to the point where we lock down how many different finishes we have. It's something that's not finalized, but the general idea that we're going for is that if you fuse 3 that are holo, there should either be a guarantee or there should be a chance that what pops out the other side is a dark holo. My opinion is that it should be a chance, but there's other people who say that if you manage to get 3 holos, it should just automatically be it. I don't know what would be the best option. I like things that have a little bit of randomness to it, especially when it doesn't come to like the sporting side of it. So, but we'll see how. It'll be something that we'll probably test out. We're going to go through this beta period where people are trying things and telling us, I like this, I don't like this, and we'll hopefully we'll get to a point where we're happy and the community's happy, and then we'll just run with that.
I mean, not everyone will be happy, but the people that do end up getting it will be very, very happy. All the more happy for it. But what would
there's going to be there's going to be some guy or girl who goes into the game and they go to capture, they go into an encounter, they find that it's a holo encounter, there's ram fire in there, they defeat it, they get to the end, they use their shards, and it just fails. And there's going to be a keyboard just thrown across the room, and I can promise you that it won't be like there's a conspiracy and, we're on the back end going, this guy gets it and that guy doesn't. That will all be locked in place, but it's going to be rough, because it could be considered quite a valuable thing, and then it's nearly there, but then it's like, because we consider it to be similar to a pack of cards, the overworld. It's sort of like, imagine if you got a pack of cards and you opened it up and you found your holo Charizard in it and you're like, yes. And then the card just like melted in your hands. You'd be like, oh my God, what is this? Right. So, but that's part of what adds to the extra rarity of it. For that reason, we probably won't go to the same levels of like extreme rarity that card games like Pokemon go to for their most rare things. Because otherwise, when you add in the extra thing, which is you have to defeat it and then you have to capture it as well, that might be a little bit too much. But we'll see. Maybe we end up being jerks and we make it even more rare.
Okay. So,
you know that I'm a bit of a troll.
So what would the highest level be? Like the highest, like, would it be a cosmic holo, or is there a name for that yet?
There's no such thing as cosmic in the game yet. I believe that it's not my area to talk about what the finishes actually are. Grant is the art director, so he gets to decide what things we put in the game. I believe that the ultimate is Dark Holo, and I'm really happy to stick with that, because in the original trailer that we did, what you saw at the end was a Dark Holo on a shard, and we've already got that set up. So it would feel a little bit weird to then have something go above it. It's kind of like you've got an episode of Dragon Ball Z where there's this character that's so powerful, but then it's like, oh, but then this guy's even more. And then at some point you've got to say enough is enough. This is the most powerful thing in the game, and it's just done. You know, we can wait till we have expansions and stuff like that before we start adding in extra stuff.
100%. Okay, so Scrubber Dubdad, he says that in the past, it's been mentioned about Illuvials needing the time to heal after a battle, and if they're hurt, or being able to like pay to have them back in action sooner. What's the latest info on this? And if you can actually speed up the healing, can you pay using SILV?
Yeah, anything inside of the game you can pay using SILV. If there's a cost to it, except for the Illuva decks, right? Because that's an exchange between two human people, so that has to be done using ETH. But when it comes to the purchases that would go to the DAO, anything can be SILV. There is the ability for Illuvials to heal. How extreme we make this is a decision that we haven't finalized yet. If we get to the point where just having an Illuvial die on the battlefield once causes it to sort of be out of action, then I think that would be too extreme. And people would sort of be like, well, this kind of sucks. I need to have so many Illuvials just to be able to continue on with my battles. So it'll probably be something like when it has fainted enough times, kind of like a technical knockout. There are plants in the game that you can find that would effectively be free of charge, that you can create things that would heal them or restore them back to full health. So you don't always have to pay SILV to do it. It's just more, we always want there to be the convenience factor for people. So if your choice is to run around for 15 minutes collecting the plants that you need to heal up your Illuvials, or just saying, stuff, I've got 6 SILV in my account, bang, I'm gonna spend a tiny fraction of that to upgrade them and get them ready, then we want people to have that ability there, because it obviously means that there's more revenue for the DAO, but also it just gives people options, you know. Free-to-play type systems are always really good when they're sort of married up with pay systems as well, that can sort of offset that, especially when it doesn't impact other players, right? Your ability to win in the game is not dependent on these things. It's more just about you going out into the world and exploring. So in those situations, we find it to be absolutely no problem at all to have people pay to get something done a little bit more conveniently.
And then these plants that you find that are essentially free but require time, would they be like in the starting area? And like, could you give us some more info on the like what we've got in the starting area so far?
So there is no starting area, so to speak. There are different versions of every region, right? Because this is not a single player game, it's a little bit harder for us to do things like, say, the water region is the entry level, and that's where you get your water characters, and then over time you then go get your fire and your earth characters, etc., etc. You can do that in a full-on single player game. When it comes to games that sort of have a little bit more of an open world, they tend to just let you explore different things, and that's what we do. But to make it so that there is a progression system inside of our worlds, you can explore the same region but with it being on a higher difficulty setting, and in return a higher reward setting and a higher cost to travel there. So there is this sort of progression where you can go to the same region a bunch of times and go through higher and higher. So there isn't really like an entry level region, but there's always these plants in there that you can harvest, and they sometimes have really, really cool things in there that are very valuable, like really, really valuable, possibly more valuable than an alluvial, or at least more valuable than some of the deposits that you have in the world. So you can get these things all of the time, but the idea is that we want to balance it so that it still takes a little bit of work. It shouldn't be that, okay, my alluvials, they got knocked out and now I need to revive them. And okay, so I walk 10 centimeters and now I can revive all of them, because otherwise what's the point of having the system in place? Then it becomes just tedious, right? Instead, it's got to be something that people can actually think about. Do I want to use a different set of alluvials and not bother with getting these plants, or do I want to go and collect them? It just gives people different choices to make inside the game. I'm not saying that this is our most compelling choices that we've got, but it's better than nothing.
And if we just left an alluvial alone long enough, would they heal themselves? Just with...
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. It could even be something as simple as we don't do it time-based, because a lot of these things are instance-based. So it could be that once you go out of the region, when you travel into the next one, they're just all ready to go. So travel would effectively like rejuvenate all of them, and you're paying for that. So in effect, it's one of the reasons why people would go to travel. Again, some of these things that I'm saying, they may not ever make it into the game, but they're just ways that I just want everyone to sort of understand the way that we think about the game, because that will help people to be a bit more informed about the sort of mechanics that they can expect.
And the one thing I didn't get in that is, so as you said, there was sort of no starting point, and you can go to different places with different difficulties. But is there a place like a hub where you just can walk around and chill?
Yes.
There is.
Yes. So the hub is Sanctum Mesa, and there's no harvestable plants and stuff like that in there. It also is not a multiplayer network game. It's not an MMORPG. So when you go to the hub, you see like thousands of other players. It's just you going around there. But that is the place where you would have like your storage locker, where the two PvP arenas are played, etc., etc. And that will actually be built into a town over time. It's big enough that there'll be like a little bit of a makeshift city there. And then we've actually already got planned as part of the lore, every single region will eventually have like a town that becomes part of it. But that would be sort of setting us up for other types of games that we might do that would be either co-op or massively multiplayer and stuff like that. We just want to try and make sure that we think about all the different things first, so that when it comes time to implement them, we don't go, oh no, this is just not going to work. But effectively, there is a hub, and because there is a hub, I think it's probably the best way to do it would be that your alluvials will recover once you go back to that hub, because it doesn't really make sense to me to have someone be able to travel and half of their alluvials are still knocked the F out,
Yeah. Well, we're coming to the last question, but definitely not the least. Mm-hmm. So, due to insanely popular demand, because this is definitely the most requested question, what is the current approximate timeline for like staking version 2, land sale, Illuvatars, and game launch, based on like how the progress is currently looking at the moment? And obviously assuming that none of your answers are like official or final, because obviously there's like council approval and stuff to consider.
Yeah. Well, I think I'd love to be able to give an exact date and that be official and it just happens, right? It would save me a lot of the work that I'm doing at the moment to know that I could just say it and that's the day that it'll come out. But really, it's just that there's a whole bunch of work that needs to be done for all of these things. For example, staking V2, I don't think a lot of people appreciate just how much work has gone into that. The size of these contracts is roughly triple what the initial ones were, plus the documentation that we have of the overall systems is something like 35 pages that explains it, mainly to the auditors so that they can understand what the flows are and things like that, so that they really understand it when they're actually auditing it. It's in the process of being audited right now. They've given us some preliminary findings, but there's still some work to do on their end and on our end. So for staking V2, I really wanted to get staking V2 out earlier, but there was quite a large delay due to when I initially put the proposal into council. There was a lot of changes that people wanted made. And part of the double-edged sword of having community approval is if they want to change something, it's going to add delays because there's a certain thing that we're planning on doing. And if it gets changed, then that adds to the requirements. There was some changes in there that are just not in any way feasible to make. I mean, someone can say, I want it to be that when we do staking V2, I get a strawberry ice cream. You know, I mean, you can say it, but having it actually happen requires a lot of work to program it. So we had to sort of make a compromise with what was feasible for us to make and what was good for the community. I've been open in saying that I actually think that there were some things in the initial proposal that I just liked a lot more than the way that it currently is. I was a little bit maybe harsher in the way that I wanted to move the things forward so that it was not punitive, but you had to be really invested in the protocol for you to get more rewards out of it. And a lot of people said, no, that's too much. So I don't get to make these calls. I'm not on the council, so I just have to do what I'm told. But that did probably add an extra, I'd say, a month to getting it done, maybe more. Not a month more because of them, but just there was a couple of little roll-on effects. We had one of the main blockchain engineers who was working on it had holidays planned so that he could finish it and then go. And then a week before he was set to finish it, that's when we had the approval out there and people said, no, it had to change. He had to go on holiday, so we couldn't get any changes done until after he came back. So there were some changes there. I would say that it's now looking unlikely that we'll get it out by the end of the year, but it will still be close. And it's starting to be like, if we had the contracts completed today, we wouldn't be putting them out today because there's a lot of work on the website to make sure that all gets done in a nice, smooth and easy way. And the last time we did it, we just put it out there for everyone. This time around, we're having video explainers made. We're having all sorts of things to get it so that everybody's like very crystal clear, because it is actually a difficult system to understand because it's the blockchain, right? Like we had a system and you've got to sort of build it on top of it. You can't just change it and take everyone's money across. You have to do it in a very clever way. And so there's a lot of extra things that we're getting done. But if the audit keeps on going and going and going, the only good side of that is that all of those other things will have time to be completed. So it could be that the second that the audit is done, we only have like 3 or 4 days worth of testing before we actually release it. But there's all these different streams happening at the same time. And I'm not 100% sure, but I wouldn't expect it this year. I would expect it in January. We want to get it out as soon as possible because I know that there's inefficiencies with our current system in terms of gas fees and stuff like that, which we don't like. So the instant that we can get it done, we will. When we launched originally back in July, within about 3 days, we had started working on V2. So it's taken a long time to get this done, but that's because it's just it's way more complicated to build it on top of than just doing it as it existed already. And we needed to solve all of those problems that came up in the first time. So that was even more difficulty. But the good thing is that these new contracts have an upgradability feature, which means that we can alter them with council approval so that they get better and better over time. The other thing was the land sale. Yeah. I believe the land sale is now scheduled for middle of January. There's most of the contracts are done for that. They need to be audited too, but they're pretty much done. There is a bit of extra work to be done by the web team. I believe one of the things that they're currently struggling with is that initially, to get everything up and running, we used one type of web based architecture, and we're moving away from that to make the systems a lot more robust in the future, to also allow us to be a lot more agile when it comes to attacks against us and things like that. These are all things that need to happen before launch. We have to be like absolutely as rock solid as we possibly can be and safe. So while they're building all this other stuff, they've got this back-end architecture change, and it's complicated. So it could go longer than mid-January, but that's roughly where it's looking at the moment. And I don't see any massive delays with that.
So the land sale doesn't.
Illuvitas.
So the land sale doesn't have to happen after staking version 2, as in like.
No, they're totally separate things. The reason why we would like them to be staggered is because if we do both at the same time, it limits our ability to check in on both of them. And if there's problems with one, or if there's something that someone needs help with, it's just spreading ourselves thin. And there's no specific underlying need why the land sale has to happen in December or January or whatever, right? The land sale is what it is, and we need that to be able to get people to play the Illuvium Zero game. But the other thing to remember is that everything gets wiped in Illuvium Zero when we have the launch of Illuvium.
Yeah.
So even if we did delay it a bit, it's going to be all wiped anyway. So I don't think it's like something where it's like we have to have it now. I guess people are just going to have to be patient with us and trust that we have a lot of people working on these things. We have, like 10 web engineers. We've got like 15 server and backend engineers. We've got a whole bunch of blockchain engineers working on these things. It's not a small team anymore. We originally had like one person per area, and that's now sort of ballooned out to 3 and 4 and 6 and 12 in some cases. I think we have something like 13 modelers. So we're getting it done as fast as we possibly can. I know that it's not as fast as what some people would like, and I know that it's not as fast as what we would like either. We're always trying to push ourselves to go further, but I'm confident that when our team comes into delays, it hasn't once been because of some incompetence. It might just be because we've decided to add something extra to make it more robust, or we've found a better way to do it, but it just takes a little bit of extra time to go about doing it. And in the end, it'll come out when it comes out. But the good thing about it is it'll be a solidly thought through system rather than something that is rushed out to market.
I mean, this many simultaneous projects and a game of this scale and with this much future vision, like I have a feeling that normally it would take way longer to do than what you guys even have in your like. Oh yeah, yeah. Your estimations are crazy.
Way longer. It's the problem with blockchain games is either you just make a game and then just chuck in some blockchain stuff, and then it's just a crappy game. Or you do it the other way around. You have some blockchain protocol and you just go, oh, let's just chuck in some Web3 based game on top of it. And it's just like the most boring. Like, we're building something that we want to exist in 10 years. And I've been on the record many times in saying I'm more than happy for our token price to just like steadily go up. It doesn't need to be something that's just like through the roof. because like this is unsustainable. Like you can't go forever that way. And usually it's just because there's been too much of a hype, and then it's a bubble, and then a burst. And I'd rather it just be people looking and say, okay, these guys are doing it the right way. And I can see that if I purchase this, I get this. And we're very upfront and open with it. There's other projects out there where it's like, hey, buy this thing to help fund our development, and trust us, it's going to look great once it's an actual 3D thing. But at the moment, it's just like a drawing, and you just got to trust us that it's going to be amazing. And I don't know, it just feels a little bit dishonest. I'd rather say we've got tight deadlines. We've always said that they were going to be tight. We've always said that these are the deadlines where if everything goes well, including we hire all the right people, we get everything done. So that when something goes wrong, it can delay it. But really good games tend to take 5 years to make. You know, almost every game is a 3-year and above cycle. We have had a team that has been working together solidly for less than a year, really, when you consider that we've grown so much. You know, we're like over 150 people now, whereas in March we were, I think, maybe 30 people or something like that, and then we built out. So that's like 5 to 10 times smaller team size. So when you consider like how many months have we been going at full capacity, it's not many. And as much as people might say, oh my God, everything is going slow, et cetera, I promise you that we're going definitely as fast as what we can. I've taken, last year I took Christmas off. And other than that, I've had basically, I don't know, maybe like 2 or 3 days. Everyone else on the project has put in their holiday schedule. And it's not like, hey, we're taking off between the 20th of December and we're going to come back on the 15th. People are like, oh, well, I'll take off the 24th and the 25th. And then is it okay if I take off the 2nd, but I will work the 1st? And those are my 4 days off for the next 6 months. They're working their asses off, and they're doing that because they are part of this whole protocol, just like everyone is. Everyone is an owner in this system, and everybody is working together to get it done as quick as we can. So Illuvitas, I mean, I don't think we've ever really put any like hard and fast dates on that, but even the scope of that, it went from being just like tiny little maybe 8-bit characters to all of a sudden, I don't know if you saw the leak that came out today, but the work that those guys are doing, it's just absolutely outrageous. These are like very, very high quality polished pieces, and they're doing 25 of them in the space of like 2 months. They've done these, right? That's outrageous. There's actually not that many people. There's maybe, I think, 3 working on those portraits at the moment, and they're pumping them out like 1 every 3 days. These are really high quality artwork that would normally take someone 2 weeks to do, and we've just said, oh, by the way, you've just got to do 3 of them in 2 weeks. And they're just okay. They know that if it goes well, it's in their best interest, so they just hammer it. You know, there's a lot of artists out there that would get everything done in a day because they can, and then say, oh, yeah, I'm working on it, I'll have it to you by the end of the week, and they're just playing the PlayStation 5 or something like that for the rest of the week. These guys are just like, no, let's get it out now, because the sooner we get it out, the better it is for us. So they're working really, really hard. So Illuvitas, the game, land sale, all of these things, I get it. I'd love to be able to tell you that we've never had any delays and that we won't have any delays into the future. But the chances are, when we're as optimistic as we are and we're pushing as hard as we are, that there's going to be some slip-ups in there. And a lot of it is going to come down to me, you know, like it'll be my fault, not them. You know, the content creators that we've got, the devs that we've got, they are doing good work. If there's a delay, it's probably something to do with maybe I changed some systems that I wanted to make it better, but I should have known that it was going to be better this other way, and I should have figured that out 2 months ago. So I'm happy to say that almost every delay that we have is probably my fault. And I'll get better over time, and I'll work on these things. But in the end, we are putting in the best effort that we can to get the game out as good as we can and as soon as we can.
I think it shows so far, and I think it's going to show in the end product, and that's what's going to really be the proof for everyone.
Yeah. You'll see a few more videos. We're actually being a little bit cagey at the moment with the stuff that we're producing, because we did a lot of stuff for the trailer, and then if we just kept on putting videos after that, they would look pretty similar. Like, as much as we're getting things done fast, day-to-day video updates is going to get a little bit boring over time. So we've been trying to get out a new video for both the Overworld, Illuvium Zero, and the Auto Battler that showcase a little bit more about where we're at and the changes that have been made. And there's a massive amount of changes. You guys can see some of them because we keep leaking artwork and stuff like that. We're never going to stop doing that. So I think next week we're going to leak an Illuvitar that has the different layers on it, so you can see what it looks like, what it could look like finally. And it's not Bored Apes, right? It's not, CryptoPunks where we're talking like 8-bit stuff and it's like, oh, that one's valuable because of this. These are really, really high quality artworks, and people will love to have them as their avatar in game. Same thing with Illuvium Zero. It's not just going to be the most, basic. We started it off as a mini game, but we've put a lot of work into it now. There's some real clean user interfaces into that game. There's some real cool mechanics in the way that it works. Same thing with all of the things that we do. The next time you see some updates, I think you'll be impressed with it. It's not finalized, because if it was finalized, we'd be out of beta and we'd be all running around happily through the forest. But it'll be a step up from what you've seen, and then people, I guess, we sort of go like on a ladder approach, where like we don't show you a final stage until we've got something, and then you guys will all be like, wow, the progress is so rapid. And then you'll see a month where there isn't much, and there's no progress. But in the background, it's like this. It's just always going up.
That is awesome. Also, just like the closed beta, when is that sort of like start of next year?
So there's 2 closed betas that we're doing. The first one is to showcase the combat system, and that will be using the game mode that we call survival mode. It's got a cool little storyline built into it. Like, when I say storyline, it takes like 20 seconds to talk about it. It's not Moby Dick or anything like that. And it'll get you to see the way that our combat works, see the characters and how they all flow. That's the first one. I did mention it in my last dev blog. I'm going to do another dev blog a bit earlier this month, because we're doing we do an internal meeting at the end of every month, just so that everyone on the project who is in whatever sort of team that they're on knows what everyone else is doing. So that will be, I believe, next week. So there'll be a dev blog that'll explain sort of what's happening in more detail. But we've had some challenges with our back-end systems, and especially we have to do some upgrades before we launch to get our security to be like totally rock solid. It's good at the moment, but we need it to be exceptional, and it just takes time to build these things. We don't want to put something into people's hands and it not be secure or safe, because it's going to sort of make people lose a little bit of faith in the project. And getting the right number of people on board to do those systems has been a challenge. They're very in-demand positions. They command a reasonably high wage, and there's just not many that know the technologies that we need them to know. So I'm not confident at all now that we'll be able to get private beta out by the end of the year. That was always my goal. My daughter's birthday is Christmas Eve, and that has always been my commitment to her is that we get out the first private beta before her birthday. I haven't told her that it's probably not going to be there by next week, but it'll probably be in January. And then the other thing is that we're also building out the overworld at the same time. So it's not like once that gets done, then they start working on the other stuff. The guys working on the overworld, they were a bit further behind because we didn't have as much development to begin with on that system, but they're catching up. And they've got some really good people in there now. It's actually slightly more simple than the Auto Battler. So it could be that the Private Beta 1 is sort of delayed by a month or so, but Private Beta 2 is not delayed because that's supposed to be sort of February. And those two allow us to test all of the systems before we go and launch the game. And we really need to do a decent amount of testing with people on various systems. So we'll be as quick as we can with the testing. We've actually got a good QA team internally doing a lot of work to, get bug fixes done and come up with as many problems in as many areas, right? We have some people working on quality control for the website, the blockchain side of things, the development, the back end. So we're trying to get it to the point where it's rock solid, but the goal has always been to develop something good. The stretch goal is to develop it fast. But I would say that the amount of work that we've had to do with an average of, let's say for the life of our DAO, we've had, say, 100 people on average in the team. It's probably a lot less than that if you look at the average overall. But if you said we've got 100 people, how long would it take 100 people to get the game that we're doing out? I would say minimum 3 years. Minimum. And we're doing it faster, but that's only because they're just working harder, right? There's a certain amount of things that have to be done every day. There's a certain amount of game design elements that they just take time and they're tedious. We have nearly hit 2,000 pages of documentation inside of the game. So that takes work, right? I mean, if everybody is doing a little bit of documentation, and it's still like 20 pages per person. Unfortunately, I think over 1,000 of those pages are me, but it's a big undertaking to do a game right. And overall, I think that we're going at a pace that I'm definitely proud of the pace that we're going at. But initially, I was thinking that we were going to be a little bit more simplified. We would come up to fewer obstacles, but we've knocked them down and we've gone through them. Little things like it took us a while to get the cinematic rendering for the game done. It was something that's it's sort of a part of the Unreal Engine that you can kind of do, but with our game, the way that it's set up, it just required a complete rewrite. Like we had to go into the engine level to fix that. That took someone a good probably 3 or 4 weeks to get done. But if we don't have that system at launch, then when someone goes to press play and record it in the highest quality, it's not there. They just have to do it in the normal version. It just makes the experience a little bit less. And so we want to have that experience be up there as much as possible. So we'll keep pushing through. I'm not taking any time over Christmas besides Christmas Day. That's sort of like my traditional day off. And the rest of the team are taking off basically no time as well. And we'll just keep pushing through until it gets done. And it could be that there's a lot of breaks in April where everyone's just totally exhausted. We get the game out and then everyone collapses on the floor dead. But I don't expect that I'll be able to take a break for, I don't know, maybe till the end of next year, because there's going to be a lot of things. Like as soon as the game launches, people are going to want to have interviews. They're going to want to do bug fixes. They're going to say, hey, what's up with this? Why don't we change it? So we'll just have as much work as we do now. There's no question about it.
And how likely is a March launch looking at the moment?
It's still on the cards. It's still what we're pushing for. It depends. It's always been something where there's like all these different streams that are getting completed at the same time, and there's certain things that have to be there, and if they're delayed past March, then the game won't be there at March, right? Then there's other things where they're already past the point where we're happy with them. They could go like the animations for Atlas, for example. We're not changing. We don't need to go back in and change that. There's a lot of artwork. There's millions of plants and stuff like that that we are just absolutely thrilled with. We're not changing it. It could be that afterwards, in 3 years' time, we go back and say, you know what? This plant could have used a little bit of extra animation or some different texturing or something like that. But it's already gotten to the point where it is ready for a beta. And it's just a matter of, well, if the things that are delayed get done that are absolutely required, then we'll get there. But the more we delay, the more we allow those other things to become more and more mature, so the game is even better, right? It's not like there's one version of the game and it's just which date does it come out, because otherwise we could just put it out now and it is what it is, right? There'd be no point in doing anything else. It's like the February version of the game is probably pretty rough in terms of the design and things like that. We've got to test it. The March version of the game is much more polished. The 2023 version of the game is going to be indistinguishable from what you see now, because it'll include all of these extra things that make it even better. So it's just a sense of degrees of trying to get it through, and I'll keep pushing for it. If the second that I know that it definitely won't be able to go out at a particular date, that would be when I would tell you. We're always upfront with those things. But there's a chance still that we can get it out.
That is awesome. That is awesome to hear. Is there any like final notes that you want to leave us with?
No, I think that we've covered a lot of topics. The one thing that I will always say is like a big thank you to the community, and especially people such as yourself for being able to get the message out there, because without the community, we can't build the game, right? They have given us this amazing opportunity to do something that we've been passionate about for a long time, and without them, it would be like if we didn't have the funding and the support, it would be just me coding, and nobody wants that, right? And the game would be 2D top down. It would be just like any other boring crypto mobile game that's out there, whereas we get the opportunity to build something that is weird and wonderful. Like I said, I'm literally, when we get off this call, I'm going to go back and start working on the dialogue for the scripts, for some of the story elements that we're doing. These things are going to be really good, right? Like there's a story in there that I'm quite proud of, and it was taken out of my hands, and we now have a lead writer who is working on it, who is just brilliant. And we work together weekly to get as much emotion as we can into the story in a way that's hard to do. If it was just a single player game, you can just tell an easy linear story. This happens, then this, then this, then this. We've got all these people playing. They can't all be the hero. And I don't think people like that. You know, I think people prefer the style of like something like League of Legends, where you just play a game and that's it, and they build a world around it. And then at some point in the future, they tell a story, and it's just like, here is a story that is a story for story's sake, and it just exists in the world that I love, right? And that's the way that we want to do it, rather than it's like, you know, chapter 1 and chapter 2, and then go over here and then go over there. Our game is an esports mixed with a collectible adventure game. That's it. And then there's a story that hopefully draws at least a couple of tears out of people in the future. And none of that would be possible without the support of like a really, really loving community. And I get it. The the crypto space can be really heavily critiqued at the moment. I go onto Reddit with my Illuvium account, and when I post in places, especially to places where there's devs, you get a lot of kickback on it, where they're just like, we absolutely hate crypto, we think this is terrible, everything's a scam, etc. And it's tough. But then inside of our community, we get a lot of support, and that does help. But with the help of the community, we're going to try and make sure that those people outside see at least one version of what a collective entity such as a DAO can do with regards to games. And that's what I'm really excited for. And I'm excited for all of those other projects out there that are dreaming big, that are going to put out something amazing. So if it's not us that switches the tide to be positive towards the crypto gaming community, it'll be someone else. But I know that there's a game there that will knock people's socks off. I think it's ours, and I'm just going to keep on working, and our team is just going to keep on working until we bring it to the surface for you guys.
Yeah, and I think the entire crypto space will benefit from this in a huge way, because the biggest thing that is missing in crypto at the moment is probably education. Even most of the people that are invested in crypto, like if you're invested in Binance.com and you've got your crypto, you don't know anything about crypto. What even is Ethereum? You've never even been on the blockchain, you know? You've got some, but do you? Like, you've never interacted with that world. And it's really hard to start interacting with that world, and it's kind of expensive. And crypto gaming and projects like this are really going to make it accessible. Even if you get in on a fiat on-ramp, you're still going to learn a lot about DeFi, because it is ultimately gamified DeFi. And you're like, even going out and getting the packs of cards, you're essentially mining the crypto that is Illuvials, that are NFTs, and then you learn that whole and all that means, and then the ramifications of that.
We are in the early days.
Yeah,
I think that's what a lot of people don't understand. People are like, oh well, you know, the NFT phase is over because there was a little bit of a dip a little while ago. There is a technology here which, if used correctly, makes games a lot more enjoyable for the people, because it belongs to them. If done poorly, well then, yeah, sure. And that's where I think a lot of the people in the past have made that mistake. But I don't feel like the crypto space in gaming is a flash in the pan thing. I think it's the start of something different. What it'll look like in 5 years' time, I'm sure, will be very different from what we see now. And people will start to work out the nuances of how to marry the technologies together in a way that makes it work in the favor of the gamer. And that's what we're trying to do. But there'll be other people out there that'll have different ideas, and once they have a brilliant idea, I'll be out there to steal it like that and add it into our game so that our game gets even better.
I'm excited to see the next 5 years unfold. It's going to be an exciting time.
Yeah, me too.
I think we covered it. I think we covered it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that there's something for everything. And if not, just keep on getting questions from the community. I will try as much as possible. I know that I've been a little bit light on AMAs, but I'm certainly not against them. So if your community comes up with a bunch more questions, I'm more than happy to answer it. I'm in our own Discord. I'm active almost every day, trying to spend about half an hour answering people's questions in there. And over time, people will start to see what the project is more and more as we start to get out our marketing and stuff like that. But as always, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about it. And I look forward to the next time.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you on. Thanks for watching, guys. And as always, if you've got any thoughts or questions, feel free to put them in the comment section down below. And as always, I'm Vetemor, you're the future, and I'll be seeing you there.